Hello, I'm Bart Dessart, part of the AWI Extension SA team. In this 10-minute talk, Mark Ferguson, CEO of neXtgen Agri, will show us how to complete an eID data plan.
So filling out your data plan, this is a really great template to go through. Ideally, you've got everyone in the business who's involved to do this together, because there's no point one having an idea or having a plan and others not agreeing with it. But yeah, just I guess a structured process to go through as you're sort of embarking on your eID journey or your precision sheep journey, is to work out what you want to improve and how you might go about that. So this will be very focused on your business. So I'm going to fill out a sort of an example version, but could be completely different. The traits that are important to you will be very different depending on where you're farming and what's important to you. So the first thing we do is to write down what we want to improve most. So that's a bit of a look into your enterprise, things that you're going well, you don't have to worry about, but there'll be a few things that you know that you're probably behind where you want to be, and so that's the opportunity to write those down. So I'm just going to write down a few. So something that a lot of people, when we go to do these workshops, something like weaning weight is something that gets written down. So that's improving that growth rate to weaning or even then on beyond. So that's a trait that a lot of people talk about. Fleece weight often comes up, and so I'm going to write down maintaining fleece weight. So as we're putting some of these other things into practice, we don't want to lose our wool cut. So that's something that people will often have. So I'm assuming this is a merino enterprise, obviously, for this example, but if you're in a shedding or a maternal enterprise, obviously you'll have a different set of traits, but the same process applies. And then something that we see a lot these days is people wanting to decrease DAG. So that's something I'm writing down as an example. And then increased lamb survival or reproduction is pretty much every workshop, every person will write that down, almost independent of what they're doing. So I often think that we don't necessarily need to get more lambs scanned. We actually need to keep what we've got alive. So I'm going to write down increase lamb survival as our fourth trait that we want to improve most. And then there's basically 4 boxes that line up with each of these traits. So once you've got these 4 down, and you can argue about them and make sure that they are the 4 that you want to improve most. And then for each of those traits, you want to go down and fill out one of these next boxes. So our first one being weaning weight. So we write in here weaning weight. And this is sort of a bit of a benchmark for yourself, like what it is currently. And you might not know that number, but it's something if you've sort of done going through the process, you might think, oh, well, I don't actually know that yet. So that might be part of your eID action plan, is to actually weigh those weaners and get an example of where they are until you know where to go. But if you do know what it is, say it's 27 kg that you are now, and you might want to be 29, and it's always good if you're writing in a goal to put a time to that. So we'll say by 2028 as an example. So I want a 2 kilo increase in weaning weight. And then there's 3 different sort of ways that could improve. And so there's often things that are out of our control and we've just given you this box to get those things out of your head. So that might be something like a great season. So if it rains all year and you get a great spring, then obviously your weaning weight's going to be up, or depending on your lamb, obviously. But yeah, if you have a good season, then weaning weight will go with it. So like a great season is one thing you can put in there that will increase your weaning weight. Obviously not sustainably. It'll just be for that particular year, and it's out of your control. Then we've given you the option to write down large system change options. So these are things that aren't necessarily individual animal things, but things that you know that if you did would increase weaning weight. So things like increasing your legume component. So that might be sowing a vetch depending where you are, or increasing your subclover depending on where you're farming. If you're in the pastoral zone, that's probably not that relevant, but that might be an option. So increase legume content. Or you might be increase soil fertility might be another way. Increase, like spreading more fertiliser will often grow more pasture, grow better quality pasture, and therefore increase weaning weight. So they're the kind of things that you can write down in that one. I guess C is where most of the action happens for your eID plan. So that's the options for data-informed decisions to improve this area. So if I'm trying to improve weaning weight, this is your opportunity to think about what are the things that I can measure or I need to know to help me make that decision or make that gain. And so things like knowing which lambs are from singles and twins. So So that means for a start, if you're not already preg scanning for multiples, you have to do that. So that might be, preg scan for multiples might be the start of this journey, because if you don't do that, you don't know who's a single and who's a twin, and so you'll always have that blur in your data. So preg scan for multiples is something that we encourage at every workshop and continue to do so, because it's so important to managing sheep, but also for improving these, making these gains that we're after. Obviously we need to weigh animals at weaning to do this, so we actually have to measure that trait. That doesn't mean on the day of weaning, often that's a pretty busy day, but within a couple of weeks of weaning, get that weight so you're capturing that information. I'd also encourage you to weigh at a point sometime after that, maybe a couple of months, 3 months after that. So some sort of post-weaning weight, because obviously that helps separate some of those maternal effects out from the actual growth effects on for that lamb. So so that'll improve your accuracy of that selection process if you actually have both those weights to go on and a growth rate between those weights. More of a system change, but buying rams with a high ASBVs for weaning weight is another option, and that's something definitely we encourage if you're trying to improve something, making sure that you're bringing in those rams that are good for those traits, as well as working on the ewes and the lambs and within the business. So there are a few different ways to weaning weight. Moving on to, so that's weaning weight sort of covered, and we go through all these 4 traits. Maintaining fleece weight was the next one. So fleece weight is currently 5.8 kgs. We want it to be 5.8 kgs. Again, out of our control might be the season. So if it rains plenty, we get plenty of spring growth, we get cut lots of wool. Again, that's not something that we can control. Large system-wide changes. A range of, I guess, of fertility, the same things we covered in weaning weight really, so we won't go into too much detail there. Sometimes that's not relevant. If we do want to increase or maintain our fleece weight, obviously we'd have to be weighing fleeces. And so important to do that. We'd probably want to, if we're going to that trouble, we'd probably want to take a fibre diameter measurement as well, but obviously not critical for achieving the fleece weight maintenance game, but you don't want to accidentally blow micron out either. And then use that data in selecting your replacement sheep in a structured way, probably ideally again with that single twin taken into account, so we're not accidentally just selecting singles. So use that in your selection processes. So pretty simple one there, and lots of people have done that for eons, weighing fleeces and selecting on it. I guess what we're trying to encourage here is it's a bit holistic. If we just did that, our weaning weight might drop or whatever, but the idea is you get 4 traits that kind of all work together and end up with a better sheep or a better production system. DAG is our next one, which was our third one. So it's pretty hard to put a benchmark on DAG. So it's kind of, you've got to be, DAG is whatever, okay maybe, but you want it to be good. I know it's pretty useless terms, I understand, but yeah, I guess you just want to see improvement in that. It's hard to put a number around that. You could maybe percentage that we're DAGgy at weaning or something, might be something you could put in there as your benchmark. So DAG is something that's as our third trait we measured. So and it's a bit hard to actually put a benchmark on a flock sense in that. So, but if you do, yeah, you could if you've done it before, you could actually DAG score them to the DAG guide and then work out what your average is and your weaners, and then do that year on year, and that would be a way to benchmark it. If you're starting out fresh, you probably don't have that information, so you might be just, it's okay now and we're going to take it to be better. Not very helpful, but as you get the data year on year, you can start to build that out. Things that are out of your control, obviously if you get a wormy season, so wet and cold, that will impact how much DAG you get that particular year, or how much capeweed grows or something might be something that impacts that. Again, large system changes might be controlling capeweed or not grazing capeweed with young sheep or other options like that. So again, these aren't as important as what we write down in option C. I guess if we are trying to improve DAG, obviously scoring DAG is critical. What we definitely encourage is using the DAG score guide. So you'll see that in the AEWI MLA score guide. You can download it online or at any workshops you go to, that'll be available. So DAG score those probably at weaning maybe, but if they're not DAGgy at weaning, you do it a bit later. So you want to be doing it when the trait's being expressed. So it might be in your environment, it might be that first Early autumn, when you get that rain and you get that first fresh pick, you get dag, and then you can score it then. So dag scoring at weaning. You can also dag score, or after weaning, you can also dag score ewes. So anytime they come into the yards, and some are daggy, some are not, a big chunk of that is genetic. It's not all genetic, but a big chunk of it is, and it's quite repeatable. So older ewes at every opportunity is something you could do if you really want to focus on it, or you just do it in your young sheep and make sure you keep an eye on them. And then obviously you're culling daggy ewes when you get that opportunity, to make those or use it in your selection at least. So not every daggy ewe might get culled, but you might want the dag score 4s and 5s, which when you see the guide, that's when they're sort of right down the legs and quite bad and pretty the sort of Crutch's nightmare. You might want to take those ones out. 2s and 3s okay, and then you'll get, as you get better, you might get harsher on that. So using that in selection in a structured way. Then lamb survival was our final area that we wanted to improve. So where we are currently, we might be 85% survival in singles and 65 in twins. Probably worth, if you do know that data, it's worth splitting them out, because the average number is often not as powerful, because if you have a different twin proportion in a given year, obviously your survival will go up because you just got less twins around. So knowing the individuals is useful. And then where are we taking that to? We might be wanting to go to 90% in singles, and maybe 75% in twins might be a good aim to have, that we know that we can reliably achieve if we put our heart to it, by 2030. What's out of our control in lamb survival? We know things like weather is obviously a key one. You get a storm event, we lose a lot of lambs. Predation can be something that's, I guess, partly in our control, but often if it's eagles or pigs coming in from another block or whatever, we can't do too much about that. So that and they're causing either disturbance or killing lambs. And then general disturbance factors. It might be something that, I don't know, that somebody drove through the paddock a few times when they shouldn't have, or whatever. So there are things that do kill lambs that we can't really control. In terms of large system changes, we could do things like subdivided paddocks. We know that mob size impacts lamb survival. So subdividing out those paddocks, that can be just temporary, like a couple of wires to keep them separate for that lambing period. So that's something that's system-wide change. And then obviously control predators is something that lots of people do, or at least try and keep the numbers down so that we don't get that same impact. Into the important option, how are we going to improve lamb survival? I guess at a more of a systems level, but it will include some data, is linking paddock to survival data. So some paddocks just, for whatever reason, have lower lamb survival, and a lot of people will actually box them up before they tail. And so just before that key bit of information comes in, they're actually thrown together and you actually don't know which paddocks deliver better than others. So building up some paddock survival data is important. And then obviously allocate those, the better paddocks, the higher survival paddocks, to your most at-risk animals, which tend to be your twin-bearing maidens or twin-bearing ewes that are a bit lighter. You can put those into those safer paddocks. Another option in this is to select for condition score. So higher condition score ewes we know will bring in more lambs. So that will be both that year, so how you manage condition score that year, but also if you keep selecting for that, you'll get better higher genetics of condition score, and that will flow through to better lamb survival. So you can select for higher condition score in ewes, and that's something we would encourage about 12 months of age, condition scoring those ewes. So that's a data point you could get. We know that wrinkle is negatively correlated with lamb survival, so we could select for, or at least score wrinkle and maybe take out those high wrinkle animals. And yeah, so wrinkle score and cull 4s and 5s maybe, that are the really high wrinkly ones. Managing condition score is the lifetime ewe management type process that everyone would have heard about. Not everyone does. So yeah, if you maintain, or if you make sure that animals ewes are in condition score or better than condition score 3 as twin bearers, or slightly under 3 for single, then you're optimizing lamb birth weight and therefore survival. So you don't need eID to do that, but it can be helpful in terms of those drafts that you're doing. So managing condition score, however you do it, is one big way to improve your lamb survival. So not all these things are kind of genetic. They're a combination of management and genetic, but you're all using data to make those decisions in a better way. Ewes. And meeting the energy needs of those ewes is another one. So making sure that at the point of lambing, you're either got enough pasture or enough feed in front of them. That's not obviously easy every year, but yeah, ultimately they're the pathways to improving lamb survival. And then I guess the sire side of the equation, using ERA, breeding value, that's basically the ewe's contribution to lamb survival. So that's a great thing to be bringing into the business as well in terms of those rams that you're bringing in. So then you've gone through and you've generated a heap of work for yourself. So you've gone through and you've all this data that you need to collect. On the back page is sort of getting the rubber hitting the road. So it's going back and looking over your areas and sort of work through the ones that you think are things that. So what are the combinations that matter most to you? So you might go back and say that this weaning weight one, the thing that I need to do most across all this is getting some preg scan data. So that preg scanning for multiples, or my data decision is to make sure I know which birth type my lambs are, and so that's linking our weaning weight back to the to birth weight. And to do that, I'm going to have to do a few things. I'm going to need to preg scan for multiples, so I need to make sure when a preg scanner comes in, I tell them to record, or to at least tell me who's a multiple and be there to record that. Lots of different ways to do that. Really efficient. If you get one person in the right spot at that day, you can get that information really routinely. You don't necessarily need to lean on your preg scanner to do that. You can actually, it's pretty, whether it's after they've drafted them or whatever, you just make sure that that data is recorded, and then go through to making sure you get those weaning weights as well. What we're asking you to do is also write down when that's going to happen. That's going to have to be at preg scanning and at weaning, but as in different traits, it might be a different timing of the year. And again, you need to leave this plan with kind of things that you can write in your calendar of things that you need to actually do, because it's easy to sit in a workshop or sit at home and fill this out, but then it's easy to go home and not actually do any of it as well. So if you get it into a plan, that's what we're talking about. And then obviously we often want to know, or we often want to make sure we've got a name against that, because a plan without someone allocated to it means it probably won't happen as well. So that's either going to be you, or it's going to be someone in the business that's allocated to that. And so then you go down through and you do the next data decision that's important to you. So go back through, find one that's important. So that might be that managing condition score piece might be something that's really important. So again, you're going through, what do I need to do? I need to condition score my ewes to do that. When am I going to do that? I need to do that at preg scanning and again pre-lambing, and allocate them appropriately. So that's the kind of process you go through. And then the final section of this plan is to work out what you actually need to do this. So what do I need to go from what I want to improve right through to what is it, the gear that I'm going to buy or I'm going to borrow or beg, steal, however you need to get that gear to get that job done. So if I'm saying weaning weight's important, I'm going to need a set of weigh scales, and I can get those weigh scales by ringing up one of my suppliers and ordering them, or I can talk to my neighbour who I know has got a set he doesn't use very much, or I can get my stock agent to come and give me a hand. And you can use all those different combinations so you don't have to go out and buy the fanciest and most expensive set to move forward. You can actually use quite cheap gear to get you started, and then that helps you sort of get some value from that effort. And then once you're comfortable, once you know you're collecting the right stuff, you can move through to maybe buying that set of gear or sharing it with someone else, or whatever the plan is. So my weigh scales might be coming from my stock agent, and then it might be, and then so as you go through your data decisions, you might get to the point of sometimes it's not just equipment you need. You might need some software to help you, or you might need some service. So you might need an individual to come in and help you just pull all this data together because you love being in the sheep yards, but you don't love being in front of an Excel spreadsheet, and there's lots of people like that out there. So we'll give you lots of examples of how to use those tools, but also you might just want to grab a service provider to actually join those dots for you, because often what we find is if it's a job you don't like doing, then you won't get it done, but it doesn't mean it's not important to you. It just means, and so sometimes it's about getting someone in to help you get over the hurdles that are slowing you down. So ultimately, you should leave this plan with your 4 data decisions made, and then any information or any data or services that you think you need, and how you're going to access them, and who you're going to make those phone calls. So ideally, you're going right through the process, and at the end of that, you've sort of got a really clear action plan. And often the destination isn't as important as the journey. Often going through that process will spark some thoughts, will spark some innovation in your head, and you might end up off on a tangent, but you'll end up with eID being incorporated better into your business so that you can go forward with good data collection.
Thanks, Mark, for sharing your experience and professional knowledge of creating an eID data plan. This 10-minute talk was made possible by Australian Wool Innovation, the Department of Primary Industries and Regions SA, and the South Australian Sheep Industry Fund.